the true story, as I heard it from my son who was monitoring the Iraqi press for the army, there was an Ayatollah who said, and it was quoted in the Iraqi press, don't feel bad that the Americans are out there in the middle of the day. They can do things that we can't because they are much better equipped. And in the summer season, they have air-conditioned underwear. That's why they're able to do this. That's worth mentioning to you because I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that we get tangled up in legal, diplomatic, constitutional complications which our enemies can't believe we are taking seriously. And they know we have magical powers, like the air-conditioned underwear, and so they think if we're not really slamming them, it must be because we're intimidated. That is the main point I want to make about Libya. I mean, I personally think, not just me, quite a number of serious people think, gosh, the president really should get some authorization from Congress before he commits us to a military engagement that goes on for months. I think most scholars accept there's some category of things which the president can do on his own, apart from defending against an actual attack. You can imagine situations, we've had situations where the president had to rescue Americans, and it's really just a matter of going in and getting them out, and it's over in a weekend. There are situations where the president has retaliated in some way, particularly with cruise missiles, and okay, that wasn't authorized, but it was done quickly. I think what's also important about these episodes is not just that they were done quickly, but that they either worked or didn't work, but they weren't strategic commitments of the United States. Something that goes on for 4 months, I think it's kind of too late to say we don't care about the outcome. A 4-month commitment that we've had already, we're now into the 5th month. I mean, if we're prepared to walk away, then you really have to ask yourself, well, how did we stroll into it? And I think it is disturbing that the war is being fought with astonishing, really astonishing degree of restraint. So that is the second point that I want to make. We've mostly left the fighting to Europeans. They're not fighting very hard. The British Defense Secretary, Liam Fox, said, Defense Minister, said in a parliamentary inquiry last month, our aim is to have civilian casualties as close as possible to zero, which is very nice, but it means you're extremely reluctant to bomb any Libyan government forces when they're in the proximity of civilians, which, what a surprise. They constantly maneuver themselves to be in proximity of civilians, so they can say, you can't strike us now because we're near to civilians. You might think this is humanitarian. Actually, the rebel forces keep complaining about this. They keep saying, no, this is crazy. This is not helpful to us. You've got to strike harder. What the British Defense Minister said, and you could say it was a talking point, but I think he meant it. He said, we are determined to make sure that we have no liability to prosecution from the International Criminal Court. So you're allowing lawyers in a foreign country to look over your shoulder and make sure that you're not fighting too hard. A couple of other examples of like amazing restraint that NATO is using here. Their naval patrols. And NATO has said we're going to prevent Gaddafi from getting weapons. Okay, that's good. Last month there was an announcement from NATO. They had stopped 850 ships, nearly 1,000 ships, and 5 of them had been turned away, which means 845 were allowed to proceed to Tripoli. I think it's reasonable to say we don't want to have mass starvation even in Gaddafi's neighborhood, but those ships cannot all have been carrying food. We are basically not having any kind of serious blockade. unless you think, blockade is some kind of nasty thing that we don't do anymore. It's in the UN Charter. It's one of the things that the Security Council was authorized to do as a measure short of war, was to impose a complete disruption of air, sea, land communications. So NATO has decided, no, but that's too unpleasant, that's not nice. We have said all along, that is the British and the French have, we don't even talk about this because we're leading from behind, but they've said they're going to honor the UN Security Council original authorization, which they interpret to mean that you can't give offensive arms to the rebels. I think this may improve now, because now that we've recognized the Transitional National Council there in Benghazi, it should be easier for them to get access to some of Gaddafi's funding, and presumably they can use some of it to buy weapons. But up until now, the British 2 months ago said they were sending bulletproof vests to the rebels, which I'm sure could be useful to them. Nobody ever won a war with bulletproof vests. We're not pursuing this in a serious way. And the reason why I think it's alarming is you just step back and think about this. NATO, putting aside the United States, which is leading from so far behind, we could just put it. But there's more than 300 million people in the European countries in NATO. The population of the Gaddafi part of Libya is maybe 3 million. Anyway, half the country is out of his hands now. So they have 100-to-1 advantage in population. They have more than 100-to-1 advantage in resources, military capacity, military experience. And I mean, Libya's never fought a serious war on its own except for, terror efforts. It's really shocking that Britain and France together are not able to do this in 5 months. It's also kind of disturbing if you step back and look at it. This is supposed to be a NATO mission. The Germans just said, no, thank you. Remember, in Iraq, they said, no, we can't act without the Security Council. Well, they got the Security Council authorization. They still can't do it. Germany's the biggest country in Europe. I mean, if Germany is not willing to help in something that Britain and France are kind of serious about, that's really telling you they are not serious. Go back to the first point. Our enemies think, this can't be about the Security Council resolution. This can't be about the Americans worrying about, it wasn't authorized by Congress, right? The Obama administration keeps saying we can't get involved with ground troops or with American casualties because it's not really a war, and it can't be really a war because it's not authorized by Congress, so it's really okay. Our enemies can't believe that any of these legal things are serious. Gaddafi said halfway into this, watch out, I will unleash my agents in Europe, and there will be a new wave of terror. Is that really what's holding back the British and the French and the Obama administration? I mean, I don't know. I hope not. Does the rest of the world believe that, no, they weren't intimidated by the terrorism threat? I don't know. I actually myself think that's as plausible as anything else. It's bad to let this thing carry on like this, and I think it's particularly disturbing to think, which is now seems as possible as anything. The French have been floating these. If you follow this in the last few days, they've had meetings with people in Libya, and they're going to negotiate some kind of compromise. If Gaddafi is not out of there fairly soon, it looks like the West is just completely unserious and incapable, and not a good message to send.